Just like atoms are the building blocks of elements, certain units in English come together in a number of ways under certain principles to form the language. And this is what we summarize as the structure of English, or English language structure. English structure. All right, this is going to be our first video in our English series, where we're considering the various units and component parts that come together to make up the language of English. As I earlier said in the introduction, that atoms are the building blocks of elements. So meaning that they come together in a number of ways to form different elements. We also have English language having component parts that play their role in different ways to give rise to to make up the language. And these structures of English language are about 8 in number. So the basic building block of English language, the basic unit, the smallest unit of English language is actually the letters of the alphabet. Letters of the alphabet. Okay, I was teaching some students and told them that alphabet actually, and most of these words are actually diminutive of Greek words, Latin, and the rest. So, for example, alphabet, it means alpha, beta, which are the first and second letter of the Greek alphabet, Greek letters, alpha and beta. So we merge them together and form alphabet. So the first structure, the smallest, the simplest structure of the English language is letters, the letters of the alphabet, and we have them to be 26 in number. They are 26 in number, and they are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all to Z. All right, so that's the first structure of English language. Now, these ones now work together with themselves. The letters of the alphabet come together in a number of ways. They combine together, and they give what is called a morpheme. They give rise to what is called a morpheme. Now, a morpheme in English language is a small English structure that may or may not make sense or may not have meaning. So, for example, look at if the letter A comes together with letter N, it's going to form an. And this is a morpheme. And of course, an is an article that makes sense. So this makes sense, of course. But look at this word, E plus il, I plus L, to give me il. Now, this does not make sense on its own. Il. Of course, it's used as a prefix of another word, but on its own, it doesn't make sense. So, but they are both morphemes. They are both morphemes. Why? Because they are just formed by the coming together of the letters of the alphabet. Now, it doesn't mean they can come together in 2s, in 3s, and 4s. Now, and they are not usually more than that. So now, when morphemes now come together and attach themselves in different ways, they also form what is called a word. A word. So a word. So basically, the mathematics is letters plus letters form morpheme. Morpheme plus morphemes form words. Now, what is a word? A word is the smallest English structure that makes a sense, that conveys a meaning to hearing. Now, a word could be an aggregation of different morphemes. So, for example, consider this word, act. Now, if I add the morpheme IVE, I form what is called active. Now the word started, the base word is actually act. This is my base word. which could actually be a morpheme, which would make sense. So my base word is act. Now I added the morpheme IVE as a suffix. Now this is going to be a suffix because I'm adding to the back of the language of the word. So act plus eve gives active. Now if I decide to add a prefix, let's say I use in, I add in at the beginning of the word, that is a prefix. I'm going to have the word inactive. Now you see that we keep forming words. We started from act, we went to active, and now we are in inactive. We could continue by adding more morphemes. So the more morphemes we add, the more we change the form or alter the form of the word. So for example, I could add ly here, and my word becomes inactively. Now, you see, this word actually started from just act. So when morphemes come together, they come in a number of ways together, they form a word. They form a word. So a word is simply the smallest single structure that makes sense. Alright, when words now come together, when they combine together without the presence of what we call a finite verb, they form what is called a phrase. When words just conglomerate without a finite verb, then we form what is called a phrase. So, a phrase. Hence, we can define a phrase as a group of words without a group of words without a finite verb. Now, usually in your lower level classes, you'll be told that phrases don't make sense when you hear them, and that is because, of course, what makes sense of an expression is the presence of a verb. So if it doesn't have a verb, it doesn't contain a verb, then it means that it might not convey a meaning. So a phrase is a group of words without a finite verb. So an examples of phrases are, we could have an article plus a noun. So if I have a bag, this is a phrase, a bag. Now, that does not convey a meaning to the hearer, because you just know a bag. Okay, what happens to a bag? It doesn't convey, now it doesn't mean it doesn't convey a meaning, but of course it doesn't convey a full meaning. Because when you hear a bag, you are bewildered. Okay, so what happens to a bag? What do I have to do with a bag? You see, because the information is not complete. So I could just say a bag, and you would be dumbfounded and be like, okay, so what do I do with a bag? All right, so this is called a noun phrase. A noun phrase. Now, we could also have some boys. Another determiner or quantifier plus a noun, and you have a noun phrase still. If I say some boys doesn't necessarily tell you any more information that is very meaningful. You only know boys, and of course there are some. So what happened to them? Where are they? Who are they? So you aren't sure of what next. So it's a phrase because of the absence of a finite verb. All right. Then you could also have some other words like in the bus. In the bus is also a phrase. And what kind of phrase is this? Now, because it is telling us about a place, in the bus is going to be an adjunct. So it's called an adverbial or adjunct, an adjunct of place. So, or an adverbial of place. In the bus. So, and of course, this is not very explanatory enough. So this, we said this to a noun phrase. This is going to be an adverbial phrase. And if I have another one like good old days. Now, of course, good old days is a noun phrase. Good old days is a noun phrase. But good, old are two words together, and here they are adjectival phrases. Adjectival phrases. Now you may ask that how do I know this kind of phrases? How am I able to classify them into these three? Now in archaic English, there used to be 5 types of phrases. We had the noun phrase, of course, the adjectival phrase, the adverbial phrase, and initially we had what was called the prepositional phrase, and we also had the verb phrase. But as time went on, it became only these 3. So now in systemic English, that is the English we speak now, we classify only these 3 as phrases, simply because, of course, prepositional phrase work as adjectival phrase. For example, as adverbial phrases. For example, in the bus here is an adverbial phrase. And look at prepositional phrase and verb phrases. We're now separated as we have what is called prepositional phrases that we call phrasal verbs, and verb phrases are basically a cluster of verbs. So, for example, when we are dealing with the tenses, so we could have something like I am being called. So I am being called. So all of this together is going to be a verb phrase. So, but we don't necessarily classify them as one of the phrases here, because on their own they are all verbs together. See, they are simply a cluster of verbs. So, and of course, a verb is defined as any structure, any cluster of words that doesn't have a finite verb, and all of these are just verbs. So it doesn't make sense to now classify a verb phrase as a kind of phrase. But of course, there is what we call verb phrase, simply a cluster of verbs. Alright, we're going to move further. After the phrases, when phrases come together, and function with a verb, then we form what is called the clause. When phrases come together with a verb, we form what is called the clause. So a clause is a group of words that contain a verb. A clause is a group of words that contain a verb. Now, this does not necessarily mean that a clause will also give us a full information, but of course we can be safe and sure and certain that there is going to be a degree of understanding for a clause than a phrase. A phrase gives a brief information that is not complete, but a clause usually gives an information that we can still work with. So that is why a clause is quite different from a phrase. A clause is simply a phrase that you add to a verb. So that is a clause. Now, so for example, if I say a bag, or some boys. Now, if I add a verb, if I were to add a verb here, for example, if I were to add a verb to some boys, I could say some boys cooked. Now, if some boys cooked, this is my phrase and plus a verb. It has become a clause. And there are 2 types of clauses. We have the main clause and the subordinate clause. All of this will be further spelled out separately in in our further future videos. All right, when clauses work together, when clauses come together, they are going to form what is called a sentence. They're going to form what is called a sentence. Now, a sentence is basically aggregation of clauses that convey a complete meaning. And of course, there are different types of sentences. Clauses also work as sentences when they convey full meaning, full ideas. For example, some boys cooked. Well, of course, this conveyed a full idea, but it will not be as complete when it would be more complete when we added what they cooked. For example, I could say some boys cooked egg. So if they cooked egg, then we are certain of what the object of the action. So then this is more complete, and then this will be termed as a sentence. But of course, this does not reduce this some boys cooked from being a sentence. It's also a sentence, and of course we could call it a clause. So this is called a main clause here. All right. So that is what a sentence is. So for example, we could have some boys cooked egg. That would be a sentence. Now, when sentences now come together, we use a number of sentences together, we form a paragraph. A paragraph is simply a write-up, a cluster of sentences that convey the same idea. So when a cluster of sentences are written together and they convey the same idea, so it's going to be called a paragraph. So, and remember that if I have my book this way, there's a mistake that students usually, an error that students usually commit. They call, now when I write like this, they call the space that you leave here a paragraph. That is not a paragraph. Now, if my book is like this, the leaves of my book is like this, the lines in my book are like this, then I put my full stop here, I continue my writing here, I continue my writing like that, continue writing, and I put a full stop here, I start here again. Now, each of these spaces here, you see, when I end this place, I start from here, I leave a small space here, I always leave, so those small spaces are not called paragraphs, those small spaces are called indentation spaces. But the paragraph is this idea that ran from here to this point, and so that is a paragraph. The idea that runs from here to here is one paragraph. The idea that runs from here to another full stop before the next indentation takes place is a paragraph. So all of these sentences that are written here together convey the same idea. That is why we call them. That's why we call it a paragraph. Now we now compile paragraphs together. You see. We compile paragraphs together. What are we going to form? Then we form a total passage. So we start from letters of the alphabet. Now a passage is simply a write-up about a topic. Now we start from the letters of the alphabet, which work together to form morpheme. Morphemes work together to form word, which is number 3. Now words come together to form phrase when they don't have a finite verb, and phrases come together with a finite verb, of course, to form a clause. Now, clauses work together to form a sentence when they convey a full idea. Sentences come together and they form a paragraph. A paragraph simply means that in as much as they talk about the same idea. Now, paragraphs now come together to describe a particular topic, thereby forming a passage. Alright, that will be it for our first video in this series, in our first English series. Do well to subscribe to the channel, because we are going to be posting content that will be efficient for your use and for your understanding of English to help you ace your examinations. Thank you very, very much. God bless you.